When you upload your first video, you expect YouTube to at least test it with a small group of people. Even a tiny push would be enough to give you some kind of feedback, but for a lot of new channels that test never actually happens. That's the part nobody explains properly. Most advice assumes your video is already being shown and focuses on click-through rate or retention, but that only matters if YouTube decides to test your video in the first place. I ran into this exact situation myself. I uploaded videos, waited, refreshed analytics, and saw absolutely nothing happening. No impressions, no clicks, and no data to work with at all. At first, I thought it was just a timing issue and that YouTube needed more time. But after hours turned into a full day with no movement, it became clear that something more fundamental was missing. The issue wasn't performance, it was that YouTube wasn't confident enough to test the video. And that comes down to something most people completely overlook at the beginning: clarity. YouTube needs to understand what your video is about instantly without having to analyze it deeply. It relies on clear signals from the outside to decide where your video belongs and who might be interested in it. That means your title, your thumbnail, and your topic all need to point to one very specific idea. Not multiple angles or vague concepts, but one clear problem that a specific viewer would immediately recognize. If that isn't obvious, YouTube has no idea who to show your video to. And when it can't match your video to an audience, it simply doesn't test it at all. That's exactly what was happening with my videos. They made sense to me as the creator, but they weren't clear enough for the algorithm to confidently categorize them. They were about YouTube, but that's far too broad to be useful. There are millions of videos about YouTube, so without a very specific angle, your content just blends into the background. When that happens, YouTube takes the safest option and does nothing. It avoids showing the video because it doesn't want to risk a bad experience for viewers. This is why your first video can get 0 impressions. Not because it's bad, but because it's unclear and difficult to place into a category. And that's a completely different problem to solve than what most advice focuses on. You're not fixing performance, you're fixing visibility. Most advice tells you to improve quality, be consistent, and post more content. But none of that helps if your video isn't being tested at all. You're effectively improving something that nobody is seeing. That's why it feels like you're putting in effort without getting any result. So instead of trying to make better videos, you need to make clearer videos. Videos that are instantly understandable from the title and thumbnail alone. That means being very specific with the problem you're addressing. The more precise you are, the easier it is for YouTube to match your video to the right audience. For example, instead of talking about YouTube growth in general, you focus on something like why a video gets 0 impressions on a new channel. That's something YouTube can actually categorize. Instead of broad advice, you create content around a single clear issue. That makes it easier for the algorithm to test your video with a relevant group of viewers. Once YouTube understands your video, it can finally start testing it. And that's the point where impressions begin to appear, even if it's only a small number at first. That small number is extremely important because it gives you your first real signal. Now you have something to measure and something to improve. From there, clicks and retention start to matter. But none of those metrics exist until your video is actually being shown to people. Before that point, you're just guessing what might work. And that's why so many new creators feel stuck at the beginning. They're trying to optimize performance without ever reaching the stage where performance is measured. It's like fixing something that hasn't even started yet. Another thing I realized is that YouTube doesn't want to guess too much at the beginning. It prefers clear signals over potential, which means vague videos get ignored even if they might be good. That's why specificity isn't just helpful, it's required. It reduces risk for the platform and makes it easier to match your content to a small, relevant audience. Even a small match is enough to begin the process. Once a few people see your video, YouTube can start learning from their behavior and decide what to do next. But without that initial clarity, the process never starts. And that's where most new creators get stuck without realizing why. So instead of asking how to get more views, the better question is how to get your video understood. Because understanding comes before distribution. Once your video is understood, distribution becomes possible. And once distribution begins, performance becomes measurable. That's when things start to feel like they're working. Not because you went viral, but because you finally entered the system. That's the stage I'm trying to reach right now. Not growth, not scale, just the first real signal that YouTube is testing the video. Because once that happens, everything else becomes a process instead of a mystery. You can repeat what works and refine what doesn't. Until then, the only goal is clarity. Not perfection, not creativity, just clarity. And once you focus on that, you stop guessing and start building something that actually has a chance to move.